Hi, it's James. I'm back again. Thanks for watching YouTube. I'm going to be conducting not so much a review today as a follow-up to my first review, the GS Air M and MS tanks, and the E-Leaf iStick Mini 20 watt. I gave you some information about the GS Air MS, which is what I had on the tank originally, or the tank that I had on the mod originally, rather. And I told you about the GS Air M and the totally wicked solution, the CS Air Micro. Also, E-Leaf has released a new type of atomizer coil that's coming out here directly. I've had my hands on it through a buddy's iStick Basic. I'll talk a little bit about the new coils, and I've had a little bit more hands-on time with the 1.2 ohm coil. So I'll give you a little bit more about how it performs versus the 1.5 ohm coils. So here's what I've got on here, just kind of a mishmash of parts. I've got the same iStick Mini 20 watt. I've got the GS Air M 4 milliliter tank with the base from the CS Air Micro. It's the totally wicked rebadge. Now if you look at it up close, you'll notice that the base has no knurling on it. That's because this doesn't have an airflow ring. For a guy like me, it actually works out pretty well because it still has two airflow slots that go all the way through, and your airflow is about the same. This drip tip, incidentally, is not the one that came with the tank. It's just something that I happen to have that I liked, and it seems to work pretty well with the size of this tank. Anyway, this base, I've been kind of digging it. I found myself with the GS Air M and MS to, generally speaking, have the airflow control ring wide open. That's because I'm pretty much a direct along type of vapor. And with this, it's wide open all the time. Let me show you what you can get out of this. It's a decent amount of vapor, and like I said, this is just a 20 watt mod. This juice is about a 50-50 mix. A little on the thinner side, but you can get more vapor than that out of this if you use a heavier juice, something like a 70 or 80 VG juice. Yeah, it's still a really great setup. What I've got in here right now is the stock 1.2 ohm coil that E-Leaf is including with some other systems now. And I've done a little bit of playing around with some of the 1.5 ohm coils that they've had released. Now let me show you the CS Air or CS Micro tank. This is their GS Air MS. And what I've done is pulled the base of the GS Air M that I have on the mod, and I've got that put on there. Now, it's a little wonky right now because it's just kind of sitting in the box, but you can see it side by side. There's not a lot of height difference, maybe about a centimeter, something like that. But you get an extra milliliter and a half of juice capacity. That's a lot, and yeah, I'm more than happy with that. These bases obviously are interchangeable. This is the GS Air M base. They pop off, they screw off, they look exactly the same. One little side effect to swapping the bases out that I have found that I like is that this particular base here, the one that came with the CS Micro tank, doesn't tend to leak. I found that the bases that have the airflow control ring, because of how it's set up and because it doesn't use an O-ring per se, they tend to build up condensation, and they do tend to leak. The condensation builds up inside of the base, it kind of oozes out, it builds up around the actual base proper, and then the ring that goes around it. That stuff oozes out, it goes on top of your mod, and it's a real pain to clean without taking it apart, rinsing the tank out, and letting it sit overnight. That's my experience anyway. This base doesn't do that at all. Other than that, totally identical. So what else? What's different about them? Obviously the height of the tank. This is a little less pocket friendly than if I used this. And that goes without saying. It's a smaller tank versus a bigger tank, or bigger versus smaller, whichever way you want to look at it. You do not have airflow control on this. So if you want to do a mouth along, it's certainly still possible, and I'm not going to cover up either of these holes, but I can still get a really nice mouth-along hit off of this thing. It's not as tight of a mouth-along hit as with the airflow control base, but I'm good with that. And I find that if I just cover one of those holes up with my finger, it does a really nice job. That's if I happen to be in the mood for a mouth-along hit. I like the aesthetic a lot better. You've got the knurling on this. I never was a big fan of that. Now, I understand why it was there. It's a functional thing. I just think this looks a lot more sleek. Still not a big fan of this whole polished stainless steel, nickel plating, whatever the hell it is. It's a fingerprint magnet, just like the old system, or the old tank, rather. And it just looks a little on the cheap side, but they're cheap tanks. They're $10, and they come with a coil, so you got to kind of weigh the price versus what you get. Personally, I would like to see them come out with a new version of the GS Air M and MS. Just do one rather than two with two different capacities. Have it be about 3.5 mils capacity, maybe top fill, so you don't have to worry about the little tight filling option that I addressed in my last video. And get rid of this whole polished metal thing. Just do it brushed stainless, just like the GS tank. I think that's a great clearomizer that uses these particular atomizers. What else? That's it. I mean, these tanks are identical. So let's talk a little bit about the coils. I showed you the coils in the last video, the 1.2 versus the 1.5 ohm. The 1.5 ohm coils have 4 little tiny slits all around the coil itself. The 1.2 ohm coils have 2 fat holes opposite each other on the coil. 1.2 is a vertical coil, the 1.5 is a dual horizontal coil. Performance-wise, they're similar but different. Things that I've noticed using these for a while. I can actually hit higher wattage with the lower resistance coil. Generally speaking, I can go between 30 to 35 watts. If you've got max PG with this, you might be able to hit 40 watts. I don't think it'll be a pleasurable vape. This coil is just not designed for that. 30-ish seems to be about the sweet spot. Right now I'm rocking it at 20 on this. If I put it on a different mod, I'm going to be hitting it around 25 to 30 because I'm using a 50-50 or maybe a little heavier juice. The 1.5 ohm, 20 to 25 watts seems to be about the sweet spot. And something interesting that I've found is that the 1.5 ohm coils actually perform noticeably better at lower wattages. For example, if I'm a mouth-along vapor and I want to vape at, say, 10 to 12 watts, I'm probably better off using the 1.5 ohm coil. Anything above 12 watts, maybe 12 to 15, they're about identical. Performance is going to be right on par with each other. 15 watts and up, the 1.2 ohm coil handles the power much better, and you get a much more satisfying vape. The 1.2 ohm coil also is much better for max VG. It's kind of counterintuitive. You only have 2 juice channels, but they're much bigger. The surface area between the 4 small holes and the 2 larger holes is about the same, but because all that surface area is concentrated into 2 places, that heavier, thicker juice actually does wick into the 1.2 ohm coils better. So if you're vaping max VG, you might want to go with the 1.2 ohm. The 1.5 though, they're much easier to rebuild. Pop those 2 horizontal coils out, build yourself a single horizontal 1 to 1.2 ohm build, and you're good to go. But you're stuck with those little tiny juice channels, so that's something to keep in mind. Now, let's talk about the new 0.75 ohm coils. I don't have that in this because this particular mod won't handle it. This will fire down to about 0.8, 0.85, and then it'll just tell me to go to hell if I try to do anything lower. The 0.75 ohm coils have been performing really surprisingly well. They are rated at 8 to 25 watts versus the 8 to 30 watts that the 1.2 ohm coils are rated at. And I'll tell you, I've had these things running at about 30 to 35 watts, and they're just chucking vapor. I think they call it 25 watts just because of the iStick Basic, and that's the kit that the GS Air 2, the 14mm tank, comes with. And the way the GS Air the GS Air 2 and the iStick Basic works is pretty much, it's an unregulated mod, and you're firing at 0.75 ohms with a fully charged battery. You know, that translates to something like 22 watts. Something like that, if I'm doing my math right. 21 to 22 watts. So they're rating it at 25 watts in case you're firing it a little above on a different tank, or a different battery, rather. I found that they actually handle wattage much better, but the same rule applies as with the 1.5 ohm. The 1.2 ohm coil actually handles lower wattage at 15 to 20 watts much better than the 0.75. If you're doing 18 to about 30 watts, the 0.75 ohm actually handles that wattage a little bit better. It actually wicks the juice better. That's something that I found, and this might just be a mental thing for me, but I think the flavor is actually better too. I'll have more on that after I play around with the coils some more and get my hands on a few more of them. Right now I'm just playing with the one, so yeah, there you go. Not really a whole lot else. Like I said, this is just a follow-on video to a couple of great products. I just wanted to wrap it up and tell you everything else about the options that are available for it right now. I do not plan on buying a GS Air 2. I don't like 14mm tanks. I don't plan on buying an iStick Basic. I don't like unregulated mods anymore. I don't think there's any place for them in an advanced or intermediate vapors arsenal. I just don't think that it's necessary anymore. That said, I will be buying some more of the 0.75 ohm coils. I am fairly well impressed with them. So if I discover anything different with them, I'll go ahead and follow up with another blip on YouTube, and I'll let you know what my thoughts are and what I have found about them. But until then, I'll be conducting another review of another product here in a few days. As always, thanks for watching. Have a nice day.